Right then, let's get stuck into it, Tim. Igor Tudor begins his first full week as Spurs interim manager today as he prepares for the North London derby. On Soccer Saturday, Timothy Sherwood, you said there is absolutely no upside for Igor Tudor taking this job. Explain what you meant by that.
I said, what is the upside? The upside is, for him, very little upside. Upside is managing a wonderful football club in Tottenham Hotspur, and I think he's come out and said he's proud to get the opportunity to do that, as every other manager would say. But he needs to win the Champions League and win every game in the Premier League, or 90% of the games in the Premier League, for him to have any chance of taking that job on the long term. That job is going to Mauricio Pochettino if he wants it, and if they're in the Premier League, which I believe they will be in. The downside is so catastrophic, it's not even worth thinking about. Tottenham Hotspur to be in the Championship next season, we need to move on. I just can't. I get shivers thinking about it.
Well, but look, the upside for him would be, we're talking about Igor Tudor, with all respect to him, and I know he's managed Marseille and he's managed Juventus, but he's certainly made himself more relevant by managing in the biggest league in the world. Yeah,
but there's not enough time to do a job. There's injuries to the squad. What success looks like, that was the point I was making to him. If he finishes and has a good run and finishes 12th in the Premier League, he's not going to get any credit for that. I believe he should, but from the outside, from the Tottenham fans, from the wider footballing public, no one's giving him any credit for Tottenham Hotspur to finish 12th. But if he was to get him relegated, then we'd all know his name for a long, long, long time.
Why do you think, Tim, they've gone for him? Are you surprised by the type of head coach they've gone for?
A little bit, because he was unknown. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I knew anything about him. I've had a look. He's had a half-decent playing career, and he's managed and he's firefighted a few clubs. He's gone in there when they've been struggling. Udinese, I think, is the one that stands out. The big clubs, the Marseilles and the Juves. But when he went to Juve, it was in Europa League spot. Can he take us to the Champions League? It's a bit like Michael Carrick's job at Manchester United now. So Michael's gone in there, and the upside would be Champions League football. The downside would be Europa League football. It's completely different when you're at the bottom end of the league. Like I say, it is staying in the division or not staying in the division. And you've got a group of players there at Tottenham who are not conditioned to fighting at the bottom of the league. They haven't been brought into that football club to fight at the lower echelons of the Premier League. Whereas other clubs, you might argue, like the West Hams of this world, not that they would have wanted that at the beginning of the season, and the Forests, who look like they're in contention as well, probably are better suited to the fight at the bottom of the league. Because a lot of them Tottenham players were probably saying on their phones to their agents, saying, if we get relegated, get me away from here. And they will believe they will go and jump to another club. I was saying they possibly will, but they won't go to a bigger club than Tottenham Hotspur. So they need to get the finger out. He needs to go in there straight away and he needs to hit the floor running.
Do you think Spurs are in a relegation scrap?
Yeah, they're in a relegation scrap, but I don't believe they'll get relegated. I really don't. I think they've got enough games out there. It's easy to say this because they've had the games they've come previously, and you would expect them to win against teams at the bottom of the league and mid-table teams, especially at home. They've been unable to get results at home. Now, he's got an opportunity. The biggest game of the season for any Tottenham fan is against Arsenal, especially with Arsenal winning the Premier League at the moment. He can almost ruin their season. It's a double-edged sword for Tottenham and for Igor Tudor. He's getting a free hit at this one. No one really expects it. But if he was to win this game, you might as well build a statue of him and put it outside the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
But, if you're admitting that they are in that fight down the bottom, is it bizarre that they've gone for a manager, and you reeled off some of the clubs that he's been in charge of? But, Udinese, they weren't fighting relegation when he was there, nor was he with Marseille, Lazio, Hellas Verona, Galatasaray, when he's managed in Turkey, in other clubs as well. So this is someone who has no experience. They
were struggling. They were struggling. The objectives, what they had at the beginning of the season, to get them back into that position. And he was success to doing that. He's not going to do that at Tottenham because obviously the objectives at the beginning of the season for Tottenham Hotspur is always, when a manager goes in there, to finish in the Champions League spots. Now, they're miles off that now. They're out of all the domestic cups, still in the Champions League. So he's got an opportunity in the Champions League to be a success. But the bread and butter is to stay in the Premier League, and he needs to do that and make sure he does that. He could possibly do that. 3 wins, that is all they need. I mean, we say all they need. They've got 12 games to be able to achieve that. I believe he will do that. I really believe that. And then have a go. Hopefully get some players back to fitness when the Champions League comes around again. You don't know. He might be Roberto Di Matteo. We see what he did.
Surely he keeps the job if he does that.
We see absolutely, and why wouldn't you want him? He's done that at Chelsea. They won the Champions League, but when I looked at that, just yesterday I looked at the squad of players what Di Matteo had at his disposal at Chelsea. The characteristics are a little bit different to the ones that Igor's got at Tottenham.
Why is Sherwood not getting a phone call, by the way, for this help Spurs out for a few months? The phone on over the weekend?
Yeah, same number. No, it never rung. Bad reception, maybe.
Sky Sports have partnered with Finalysis to discover true fan opinion, to have your say on your club. Download the Finalysis app right now. Scan the QR code for more details. And we can speak to a Tottenham Hotspur fan, Alfie Nicholson. Alfie, good to see you again, mate. So, Igor Tudor. Tim needs a little bit of convincing. What about you as a Spurs fan?
Yeah, I'd say the same. I think it's a bit of an unknown, really, for most Premier League fans. Someone coming from the Serie A. It's a surprise for me as well. I thought we'd go internally. I thought Heitinga would get the job, maybe. I thought there'd sort of be a firefighter type manager hired. I thought maybe even Tim said himself, he put himself forward, maybe he'd get the job. But it's now been chosen that we've got Igor Tudor, and it's a bit of a surprise. But he'll soon win over fans if he pulls us out of this dire situation, really.
Yeah, I never put myself forward, by the way. I don't know where you got that from.
I put him forward.
Yeah.
So Tim thinks you are in a relegation scrap. Look, 5 points above the line. And actually, Alfie, I was looking at some of your fixtures, and you'll know these off the top of your head. But there are some tricky ones in there. When you go to Anfield, you go to the Stadium of Light, you go to Villa Park, you go to Stamford Bridge, still in the remaining 12.
Yeah, I agree. I think we are in a relegation battle. I think you can't be 5 points by the relegation zone with 12 games to go and not be almost. But I think there's some other sides around there that could get dragged in. And I think we have to scrap up every point we can get, really. But as you said there, you pointed out a few pictures. I think there's Wolves away on there. I think there's Nottingham Forest at home. Them two games in particular are going to be the two ones we really, really need to get our points from.
Hold on, there's some trouble here if you're worried about Molineux.
Well, I know, exactly. So we need to make sure we get them points on the board. That's what I'm saying. They should be points we should be easily getting. These should be 3 points we should easily be picking up. And then if you get 3 points there, then you can start to get in a run. And we've seen teams at the bottom do this over the years. If you get a few points, the confidence breeds confidence, and you start to pull away from it. And then hopefully, Tudor can start to get some confidence in the squad, and we can start pulling away from that and getting more towards near the mid-table rather than the bottom three.
Alfie, for Igor to be deemed a success at Tottenham, what would he need to do? What does success look like for him? Not for the club,
I'm
for
careful.
him.
Yeah, I'm careful not to be asking for too much. So I think survival doesn't mean the basis, really. I think that's minimum objectives complete. You can tick that off. And I think there's an opportunity for him to sort of breathe a bit of confidence into the squad. And as you said yourself, that the quality of the squad isn't absolutely catastrophic, that it's one of the worst in the league. This is a squad that is at least the 13th, 14th up best squad in the league. And I think there's an opportunity for him to sort of, galvanise the players, and sort of, if he puts some performances out with a Spurs squad that has the ability to play some attacking, some exciting football as we saw under Ante Postecoglou, I think that'd be a real big success for him. And there's plenty of vacancies in the summer. There's going to be Crystal Palace looking for a job, Man United looking for a job. I don't think he's going to get that, and obviously Spurs looking for a job. And who knows if Iraola goes elsewhere or Silva goes elsewhere. That leaves Fulham and Bournemouth. And I think he's sort of ticked off Serie A, it sounds like. And if he does well at Tottenham, perhaps that allows him to move into the Premier League, which is obviously one of the pinnacle leagues for top managers to be in.
Did you think, Alfie, that the club wanted to keep hold of Thomas Frank, and it became so toxic at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium especially, they had no choice in the end?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened, really. I couldn't believe he lasted after West Ham. I thought that is probably the worst result that could potentially happen. You look at the fixture list and you thought, we can't lose that one. You can't go and lose to West Ham, who was so out of form. And we've sort of breathed the life back into them. And now they're fighting against us. We've sort of opened up the relegation dogfight for ourselves by losing that game. I thought even the Fulham at home game way back in November was sort of the writing was on the wall then. Arsenal away. These were performances that were indicative of the fact that Thomas Frank wasn't the right fit and it wasn't going to work out. And I was waiting for it to get worse and worse into the stadium, and thought, I personally thought it'd get to the end of the season and they're sort of going to block out the whole noise. But eventually, luckily, I think for us as well, it got to a point of toxicity where they had to remove him. And
do you think you would have got relegated with Thomas Frank?
Oof.
I think there's a high possibility. It was almost getting to the point where, you only get an interim in when it gets so bad that almost anyone else would be better. And I think that's what point we got to. It felt as if we couldn't see the next point coming, really. I don't think we'd won in the whole year. And when that sort of record gets longer and longer, if we get to March and won all year, then yeah, I was really getting to start worrying about relegation. So I think the percentages probably went from 50% and it's gone down to about 20, I think, without him there.
Alfie, be honest. This time last year, you again had a massive injury list. I'm not sure, maybe Tim can explain why all the Tottenham players are always injured. That's for another debate, potentially. But did you, being completely honest, think you had any chance of winning the Europa League? And look, I'm not suggesting Spurs go and win the Champions League, but you look at who they could play, and it's been chalk and cheese, hasn't it? The performances in terms of the Premier League and the Champions League. Atletico Madrid, Juventus, his old team, by the way, Igor Tudor, Galatasaray, his old team, or Club Brugge as potential last 16 in that tournament. That doesn't look too bad.
No, there's an opportunity for him to do a good run in the Champions League. I know we've referenced Di Matteo, but I did think sort of the Europa League, the calibre teams were a little bit less. It felt like the way Ange was almost speaking as well, the momentum was with us in that Europa League campaign. That it felt like that was an opportunity to go and win that, and it felt like we were sort of almost destined to go and win that Europa League when the momentum's with you and when you're performing well in that competition and so badly in the league. And I think potentially if we were in the Europa League again, Thomas Frank still would have a job because there was an opportunity for Thomas Frank to go and win the Europa League more so than there is the Champions League. So I don't really give us much of a realistic opportunity, but it's nice to dream and it's nice to sort of have the fans allowed to cling on to something as well. I mean, if we have a nice European light under the lights, as we have done a few times this season, if we get to the quarterfinals of Champions League, that's something to get the fans up for. That's something to win the fans over with. And I think that'll be something that all fans will be looking forward to.
What about this as a scenario? You win the Champions League, you get relegated, you have Tim Sherwood as your manager in the Championship next season.
Would you do it, Tim?
No, I've got a manager for you next year in the Championship anyway, if that comes to that, but it won't. Scott Parker's the man for that job.
Oh, he's already teed up Scotty Parker.
You've got to think ahead.
Alfie, good call. Thanks, mate. Speak to you soon.